Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today I'm going to be counting down the top 10 biggest potential draft steals of the 2022 NHL draft. Now with this draft class being so wide open, especially in the first couple of rounds, there's so many options that are available and so many ways that guys could end up dropping. But throughout this draft, who will be the players that get undervalued the most, go way lower than they should, and will end up being the draft steals of the draft? Watch till the end for all the prospect analysis and all the rankings, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys are not subscribed, so if you like hockey and if you like draft content, this channel is the place to be. Now I got good news, especially if your team has a lot of picks in the mid-rounds, second through fourth rounds. Usually that's a pretty good strategy to bulk up as much in those middle selections, but this year especially, there's going to be a wide open playing field, and to me, a lot of players are going to come out of that range and look to be solid NHL contributors. Now, going to the first NHL draft steal and technically the 10th best draft steal on this list, let's go on to a player that's been ranked a lot lower than I think he should be in Russian winger Gleb Tkazov. Now, to me, Tkazov is an interesting prospect and a guy that I rank pretty high. In terms of my rankings, I have him number 24, but there's a lot of things that I just love from him. He has such great pace to his game. His smarts and his consistency with his passing is it's at such a high level that offensively, I think there's a lot to unlock. He's a guy also at 6'1". Sometimes you get some Russian lanky players that don't really play all too physical, but Gleb Tkazov doesn't really back down from a fight. He's a guy that can go into corners, get pucks out, and really keep pace along his same team. Now, to me, there is some question marks there. Will he be able to adapt to the smaller ice? Will he be able to adapt to a more hard and consistent game? That's still up for debate, but to me, with Tkazov, he's a guy that could be available potentially in the late second round, and at that point, that is an absolute steal to get that potential out of a player. Next up, going to the 9th biggest draft steal of this draft, let's go on to one of my favorite defensemen of this draft class in defenseman Elias Pettersson. No, Elias Pettersson did not re-enter the draft as a D-man. We have a different Elias Pettersson, this time of 2004, who in my opinion represents some very good traits and some great skill. At 6'2", age 18, he wasn't ranked at all by Bob McKenzie in his latest draft rankings. None whatsoever, not even an honorable mention, which I think was an absolute shame. But this is a guy that could be available even outside of the top 4 rounds, which to me would be absolutely legendary if a team is able to pick him up around that range. This last year ended up playing 17 SHL games, got an assist, 1 point, played 6 games in the World Juniors for Sweden. But in my opinion, this is a player that is one of the best pure defensemen of this draft, and as well I think will adapt to the NHL game defensively quite well. To me, when it comes to Elias Pettersson, he's a player that has a lot of good traits, but to me, with his skating and with his raw fundamentals, his defensive game really pops, and he's not a guy that will be all too noticeable offensively. He's not going to be this player that drives play or anything, but he's going to get the job done with his speed, with his skill, and his overall lankiness, and with that stick that he provides. He's such a good surveyor of the defensive zone. He could be a solid, consistent, and efficient bottom pair guy, and to me, if you get that around the 4th round, it's beautiful. I have him ranked top 50. I have him 47th overall, but I think there's so much potential defensively to unlock with this player. Going on to another solid prospect here, let's move on to the 8th potential big steal of the draft. This is another player that will likely, alongside Elias Pettersson, be around that middle range of the draft, in Nicholas Moldenhauer. Now, he has rised up quite a bit throughout this year, missed some time at the start of the season, but came back strong with the Chicago Steel, and the World Juniors played quite well. But as a center and right winger, to me, there's quite a bit there that you can unlock. This last Bob McKenzie ranking, he didn't have him in the top 90, but didn't have him as an honorable mention, so technically inside the top 100, but this is a guy that you can get inside the 3rd round, late 3rd round, potentially in the 4th round as well, maybe even the 5th, if, of course, the size ends up dropping him. But this last year with the Chicago Steel in 41 games, got 18 goals, 25 assists for 43 points, and in the World Juniors again for Canada, I thought I had a pretty strong showing with 3 points in 4 games played and looked very solidly. To me, when it comes to Moldenhauer, though, there's a very efficient game there. I think his transition play needs some definite work, especially with the speed there. But to me, there's a lot of potential with Moldenhauer in terms of his physical traits at 5'11", always puts in strong work. His passing game is really refined and quite at a pro level already. And to me, his puck handling and his skating are solid enough to where you could have a solid, potentially third-line offensive player here who puts in the work and does a pretty good job defensively too. Not really too many holes, but also also nothing that really strikes you too far, and I think that's one reason why Moldenhauer could drop, but again, around that 3rd or 4th round range, to me, Moldenhauer is a pretty solid pick around that time. Now let's move on to the 7th potential big steal of this NHL draft and go on to a guy that in my opinion is pretty misunderstood, and Elias Salomonsson. Now to me there is still so much to unlock potential wise. Won't turn 18 until August 31st, one of the youngest players of this draft. At 6'1", he made a name for himself last year in Sweden in 2021. He played 3 SHL games, got over a point per game in the Junior 20, and played 7 games as well in the U18 World Juniors, and I thought played pretty solidly, but he was a guy that was projecting to be a top 20 pick of this draft going into this year, and no matter what you go through, this season was not exactly perfect for him, but he did play 10 SHL games, playing the World Juniors, and to me, I thought he was fine. Didn't really improve too much, but that was really the biggest problem. There was a lot of stagnation in his game, but obviously this last ranking, he was ranked 53rd by Bob McKenzie, so there are still people holding on to him as a second-round prospect. To me, I also hold him around that same range. For me personally, when it comes to Salomonsson, I have him 43rd, but to me, there's still so much to unlock there. His skating, in my opinion, is still one of the best among defensemen of this draft, and you combine that with his puck handling ability, and in my opinion, really raw, but still could be refined passing game, and to me, there's a solid two-way defenseman here that could be unlocked. The problem is, I think some of the hockey sense there is a pretty big detriment. He can make some decisions that are just so obvious, yet he won't be able to make them at times. Still kind of reminds me a little bit, just a smidge of Simone Edvinsson of last year. Not as impactful, not as potential filled, but there are still some of the same problems. But if he goes the right system, if he gets to a team that believes in him and works with some of those issues in terms of his IQ, there are a lot of traits there that I just love, and you could get him around that 2nd round, maybe late 3rd round, and to me, that's a pretty perfect bet to make. Next up though, at number 6, going on to one of my favorite prospects of the 2022 draft, one of the prospects I'm the highest on, in Lekkerimaki, who, in my opinion, is a player that's just gotten absolutely just dropped for the wrong reasons. As a center and right winger, he could play both. He's played both throughout this year, but at 205 pounds, 6'1", he recently was ranked 27th by Bob McKenzie in his rankings. I'm pretty sure they'll drop quite a bit, and throughout most of the rankings that we've seen him go outside the 1st round and the 2nd. I've seen some rankings putting him in the 3rd round, which I think is an absolute travesty. For me personally, with McGrady, I have him in the top 20. I have him 16th overall, and to me, there's a lot there. Even though his high-end trades do still need some work, this year in the USDP, though, in 54 games, got 35 goals, 34 assists for a pretty nice rate at 69 points. In the World Juniors, I thought was incredible and was maybe Team USA's best player, 9 points, 8 goals in 6 games played. The biggest issue with McGrady, and again, we're going through all of this time and time again, is the skating. There's a lack of explosiveness there, and especially in his offensive and transition game, that does come to his detriment quite a bit. He gets away with it now, but in my opinion, going to the University of Michigan, that is a program that loves their good skaters, and to me, McGrady could really fill into a solid role there and get under some better coaches there potentially with his skating, if he's able to improve that. To me, I love his positioning, one of the better positional and aware players of this draft, and to me, he always knows where to be, always loves to be intense in the physical areas, and especially in the offensive zone, and to me, there's a solid passer, great fundamentalist, and potentially a solid middle 6 centerman or winger there. A lot of potential, but still a long ways to go. But if you get him in the 2nd round, to me, that is definitely a big steal. Then going up next up to Devin Kape at number 5, I believe. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, so McGrady, of course, was 6th. 5th is Devin Kape, and I still, in my opinion, one of the bigger potential steals of this draft. Right winger, age 18. He's gotten a little bit more attention recently, but he was recently ranked 67th by Bob McKenzie, and to me, that is quite a bit lower than where he should end up going. For me personally, when it comes to Kape, I have him ranked 40th in my mock, and that's pretty high compared to where most people have him. You have him ranked 61st in terms of North American skaters by NHL Central Scouting, for instance, but to me, there is a lot there, especially with the physical game that I think brings a lot to the table. This last year in the USDP, in 53 games, got 13 goals, 25 assists for 38 points. Not a ton of point per production in the World Juniors, it was much better though, and I thought he had a really impressive showcase there, played some of his best hockey, 6 points in 6 games played, and even without the points, I thought he played well. He's going to go to the Boston University there, and I think he'll have a really productive collegiate career. To me, when it comes to Kaplan though, there's so much to love with his 6'3" frame. He uses it excellently in the offensive zone. This is not a player that with his size, like a Conor Geekie, that just doesn't use his physical traits, doesn't use his size to his advantage. Kaplan in every single way uses it to his advantage, and it comes out in spades every single game. He loves to protect the puck, loves to drive play, loves to get around the boards and get in dirty, and in my opinion, this is a guy that with the finesse that he has, with the goal-scoring touch that he can provide, has a lot of underlying skill that I don't think really gets enough credit. People obviously look at the size, see that as the best thing, and it might be, but to me, there is some speed there, some skill there, and to me, I think he could develop as a pretty solid, maybe third liner, maybe even second line player if it all pans out. Next up, going to another interesting player in this draft, another player from the USDP at number 4, and one of the biggest draft steals of this draft, in my opinion, in Seamus Casey. Now, I've been pretty high on Casey throughout this draft here, and even though there has been some points where I haven't been as confident, to me, I still see Casey as a first-round prospect. Right now, in terms of my rankings, I got him in my 26th spot for my draft rankings, and that's pretty high considering where most people have him. Bob McKenzie as well has him 51st, so around that second round, late second round range. But to me, there's such a great confidence, offensive, and play-pushing defenseman here if you're able to unlock it. Obviously, the size at 5'10", 172 pounds isn't ideal, and there is some big issues there in terms of some physical consistency, especially getting up in transition. But this last year with the USDP, in 48 games, got 10 goals, 23 assists for 33 points, and again, was a point per game for the US in the U18 World Juniors. But to me, again, if we're talking about possession, if we're talking about play driving, if we're talking about consistency with skating, Seamus Casey provides so much, and I think on an offensive level, if he ends up panning out, there's a top 4 power play quarterback there, and to me, although there is some boomer bust potential, if I'm a team around that 50th range and I got the chance at Seamus Casey, I'm absolutely taking that chance. But now moving on to the third most potential filled draft steal of this NHL draft class. To me, a player that I think exemplifies a lot of what an offensive defenseman will be in the future of the NHL. Next up, I have Russian Vladimir Grudinin. Now, again, just like Gleb Tkazov, there's a chance that Grudinin does slip because of the Russian factor, which honestly at this point I don't really blame teams for putting into effect. But at 5'10", 159 pounds, to me there is some pretty big differences between Seamus Casey's game and Vladimir Grudinin's game. To me, when it comes to Grudinin, there is a much higher skating ceiling there. He's one of the most mobile, agile, and confident skaters in this draft, let alone defenseman, and he uses that so often to get out of pressure, to get away from opponents. The problem is, I think Casey handles physical play a lot better than Grudinin. I think Grudinin has a lot of work before he gets fully into that pro game and really is able to focus it all in and really get a great game under him. But to me, if he's able to bulk up a little bit, there's a player that with his skating, with his elite mobility, can just do so much for a transition, do so much to reach pucks up the ice. And in terms of what the actual draft stock is for him, this last mock draft for Bob McKenzie, 88th. So he's a player that you could get in the third round, and I could even see, again, with that Russian factor dropping a lot lower than that, maybe in the 4th or 5th round. And to me, Grudinin is one of the premier skating defensemen of this draft. This last year as well, played 6 KHL games, played 7 in the playoffs, got 18 MHL games, 13 points in 18 games. But to me, this is a guy that, even though there is a chance that he might not come over for a while, this is a guy that I would bet on if you have a mid-round pick or are looking for a skating defenseman that can really be great with possession. Grudinin is your guy, and to me, he could be one of the later steals of this draft. Now moving on to the second player on the list and the second biggest potential steal of this draft. Let's go on to one of the obvious ones, for me at least, in Brad Lambert. Now, obviously, I don't have him as a top 3 prospect anymore, but I still have him ranked 4th overall. And there's a lot of question marks surrounding Brad Lambert and a lot of confusion as well surrounding Brad Lambert. He obviously will likely go in the late first at this rate. And, of course, with Bob McKenzie, surprisingly, only had him ranked 16th, which I think was pretty high with what I was expecting. But you see across the board, there's a lot less stock for him now than where there used to be, and he's 10th on the NHL Central Scouting EU skater board, which just shows how much stock has been dropped by him. But to me, there's still a lot to unlock there, and this past Liga season was a disaster. No ifs and buts about it. Played 24 games with JYP, 6 points, played 25 points with the Pelicans, 4 points, only had 10 points this last year and 0 points in the playoffs. But in the World Juniors, he was absolutely brilliant, the canceled World Juniors, and I thought we saw some of the skill and some of the speed that he can provide. To me, he's the best skater of this draft, whether it be with forwards or defensemen, has so much mobility, so much creativity with his skating and deception along the boards that to me, this is a guy that could play in the NHL and skate with everybody along there and be able to float quite well. Everything else about his game might not be ready, but to me, this skating is a serious highlight, and although there is some hockey sense issues, there is some plays where you're not making the simple pass like you should, being a little bit too fancy about things. To me, if you're able to shore that up, if you're able to get him a little bit more physically ready, this is a guy that can pitch in defensively, be solid in the neutral zone, get back on pucks, and really use his speed quite well. This isn't a one-dimensional offensive player here. This is a guy that can be effective in all 3 zones, and with his 6'0" frame, I think there's a lot of potential for a physical, solid speed player here. The problem is, everything went wrong in this last year in the Liga. His shooting percentage was awful, his teammates were awful, and to me, it is a must. He needs to come to North America next year, whether it be in the WHL now with the Seattle Thunderbirds, whether it be in the AHL. It's obvious that he just cannot really focus and really thrive in Finland, and to me, I think he needs to come to North America as soon as possible. If that happens, I think he's still a top 5 talent, but if he whittles away in Liga, and if he whittles away in Finland where he's just not really belonging, to me, that would be a serious mistake. But if you're able to get him in the late first round, you should be partying. Next up, going to maybe the biggest draft steal of the 2022 draft, looking upon it and looking to one of my favorite and most offensively octane players of this draft class. Let's go on to number 1, and let's go on to Lane Hutson. To me, one of the most electrifying defensemen of this draft and one of the most interesting. And you look at the height, and that is really the only thing keeping Lane Hutson back for a lot of people. That 5'8" frame, that 159-pound weight to him, that is a concern for sure. The physical side of Lane Hutson isn't really refined, but I think it's better than what most people are really saying with him. He can hold his own in some key areas, especially along the corners and along the boards. I think there's a player that can get out of pressure quite well. This last mock draft, or this last rankings by Bob McKenzie, had him ranked 40th. But you can see most of the time he's ranked around the lower second half, and when it comes to the NHL Central Scouting North American skaters, they had him 25th ranked, so not really too high compared to most people. But for me, I have him right at the very top of my second round. For me personally, I am ranked 34th, and to me, if this is a player that if you get in the late second round, maybe even the third round, would be one of the biggest draft steals of this class. This last year in the USDP was over a point per game as a defenseman, with 63 points in 60 games, and was even more of over a point per game in the USHL, with 32 points in 27 games, and over a point per game in the U18 World Juniors, 8 points in 6 games, where he looked absolutely brilliant. To me, this is a player that if he pans out, could be one of the best offensive defensemen, just pure offensive defensemen of the NHL. This is a guy that has such great offensive traits and pro traits already, is so speedy, so deceptive, and can really make really in-tight passes out of nowhere. And to me, this is a guy that reads the ice extremely well, can survey it extremely well, and be able to push play at such a high rate. And to me, this is a guy that can create offense, he can finish it, he can play well in the offensive zone, be solid in a power play, and to me, the offensive traits of Hutson far outweighs some of the negatives. There is a case as well to be made that he could be a first-round talent if it all pans out well, but to me, if he gets to the right system and he's able to get a lot of opportunity, there's a top 4 defense, maybe even top 2 offensive D-man in Lane Hutson, and getting that in the late second round would be special. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the draft steal video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Comment down below what you guys agree and disagree with. Who would your biggest draft steals be of the 2022 NHL draft? Let me know your thoughts down below. Share this video with your friends. Get it to all the NHL hockey fans you guys know out there, and especially everybody that's focusing in on the draft right now. Get it to them if you can. And of course, click this card for all of my hockey prospects content right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.